My name is Frank Bonada, and joining me today is Carl Dimond. We're here in the build-up to UFC 288, Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo. Um, Fun card, or fun main card at the very least. How are you, mate? And how are you feeling about this upcoming event?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I think that this card is a strange one. It feels like the hype levels for this one are quite low compared to
Mm,
the last few pay-per-views we've had. Um, but I I don't really know why, because I was really excited for Henry Cejudo to come back. I
yeah.
just don't think that wave of excitement has maybe hit me yet. Maybe it'll take the weigh-ins and stuff like that, like the public ones to finally get there. Because I'm really excited for that main event, and there are some good fights on the main card, like you said. I think the prelims are a little bit lackluster, if we're being honest. Maybe apart from the Marina Rodriguez Jandiroba fight and Jourdain versus Matt
Oh,
Favola will be a lot of fun.
yeah. That's
But yeah, it is really all about the main card, I think, and maybe that's why it hasn't got the same hype. You haven't got as
yeah.
many exciting prospects and stuff like that earlier down. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, um, but just like stylistically, it's a very intriguing pairing of styles. Um, Sterling possibly one of the I saw Caelan Loughran describe him as one of the best in the world in one facet of the game, and then like a bog standard fighter in like the rest of it. Because he is one of the best back take submission grapplers out there. He's a good wrestler as well, to be honest, but his striking is dysfunctional, I think. He's got some good stuff in there. The front kicks down the middle are always sort of something that people point to. And he uses his range and his frame quite well. Um, but man, I mean, I feel like because Suhood has been out for so long, people are sleeping on him. Maybe he's lost a step. He is 36, which was getting on a bit for a bantamweight, but I just remember what he did on that tear between flyweight and bantamweight. He really was something special.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that so much of my attention, at least, has been focused on Henry Cejudo because, like you said, with Sterling's title run so far has kind of lacked the one performance where you go, okay, no, he is the best bantamweight in the
Yeah.
division. But like to flip that, like if he beats Henry Cejudo, there is no argument that he isn't the best bantamweight in the division. Like that is the name that he needs, I think, to really like even a win over like O'Malley or somebody like that. People will go, but was O'Malley really ready? He didn't.
Mm.
People will still argue he didn't beat Piotr Jan. So like but Henry Cejudo, there's no argument. Sure, people will say he's been gone for 3 years and stuff, but I like I honestly think that Henry is going to be better than he was the last time we saw him. I think that I've watched a lot of his videos that he does with Demetrius Johnson,
Yeah.
because of covering one. Like they're always really interesting. And the thing he always points at with DJ, the advantage that DJ always had over him was the way that he blends everything, and I think that's what he's been working on
Mm.
mostly. Would be my guess because it's so strange with Henry Cejudo. He entered as a gold medal wrestler and just wrestled. Then he got beat by DJ and completely switched. And he
Yeah.
like never used, apart from the DJ fight, he threw in some takedowns. But like Marlon Moraes, Dominic Cruz, TJ, they were all striking.
Mm.
Like so, I expect him to be able to mix those two kind of styles we've seen from him better than we've ever seen before. And I always hate the like when people throw an asterisk on a performance and you know that if Henry wins or loses, they'll say, well, Aljamain was never that good or Henry's
Mm.
been gone for 3 years. But like, I do think this is a great fight. I'm really excited for this matchup. And I think that Henry has picked his time to come back very purposefully.
Yeah, 100%. The only one thing with the whole like if Sterling does win, will he be considered the best bantamweight in the world? There's also the caveat of Marab being there as well, which is just speaking to my co-host on the MMA stream the other day, like it's just such a bizarre situation where you've got these two elite fighters who aren't going to fight.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a strange situation, but I mean, obviously Sterling's talking about going up in weight. I think Cejudo mentioned recently that they might even consider a rematch after, regardless of this fight result, up at 145 pounds, which would definitely be interesting. Yeah. Do you have a side that you lean to in this one? I mean, if you look at like odds and whatnot, it's dead even. Um, Personally, I back Cejudo in terms of the variety that he can bring to this fight. But I mean, Sterling's grappling and submission threat is the equivalent to Alex Pereira's left hook. He's lethal.
Yeah, I agree with what you said originally about the point that Calvin Lochran made about Aljamain Sterling being very, very good at one particular
Yeah.
thing. And I know that he was able to do it to Piotr Jan in their rematch, but I always think back to the first fight where he just wasn't able to get him to the
Mm.
ground. And from that point on, he looked so discouraged and like he had no other option. And I can't see him being able to take Henry Cejudo's back. Like maybe, of course, there's a chance, and he is so good at that. Once he gets it, that's the end of the round. Like you're either getting submitted or you're losing the round from
Yeah.
there. But I think that Henry Cejudo is a nightmare for
Mm.
Aljamain Sterling. Like you look at Sterling's best wins, and they're never against guys where you go, he could probably hold his own in the grappling with
Yeah.
Aljamain. It's always guys that you go, okay, Aljo has a clear grappling advantage, and you can't say that about Henry Cejudo. Like I really am surprised that Henry Cejudo isn't a big favorite, to be honest.
Same. So am I. I was thinking that this morning, like, yeah, just looking at the skill sets. I guess you can say Sterling's been inactive, so Cejudo's been out for a while. That would probably be the reasoning why. Um, but I mean, like, yeah, I just terms of pure skill set alone, I definitely give Cejudo the edge.
Yeah. Can I throw? I don't want to take away from this fight because I do think it's really good, but this is something that crossed my mind after Marab beat Piotr Jan.
Yeah.
Would you be more excited for this fight if it was Cejudo versus Marab?
Ah, no, I don't think I
Okay.
would. I would be very intrigued to see this fight, but the fact that these two guys have a bit of a background, a bit of a uh, dislike to each other, rivalry, that helps sell me a little bit more because I think I'd probably be in terms of like on a stylistic level, I'd be equally intrigued to see Sterling versus Cejudo or Marab versus Cejudo because they're just very interesting stylistic
Hmm.
matchups. But this one has the added caveat of there being some inbuilt rivalry. What about yourself?
Yeah. Uh, I think this is there's always a conversation in MMA that I think should probably happen more between what makes a good fight. Like, is it actually going to be a good watch, or is it
Mm,
just an interesting matchup?
right.
I think that Marab versus Cejudo is a more interesting matchup because I don't know how Marab's wrestling pressure translates against someone who is that good at wrestling, and you never see Cejudo use it anymore.
Mm,
But I think this will be a better fight.
nice.
Like I just think Sterling's style is a little bit more. It's more unpredictable. You don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is, the Marab one, it's just like someone who game plans so well. Like, both Cejudo and his whole camp game plans so well for individual opponents. Seeing him tackle the problem that is Marab, I've seen him before say like talking about taking him down in the middle of the cage where he can't use the fence to get back up to his feet. Um, Methods like that to take away Marab's big takedown offense. It would be very intriguing to see how it plays out. But like you say, I do think the Sterling uh, matchup it is probably a better fight. Yeah, but they're both fascinating, and I would not be surprised if we saw both of those happen.
Yeah.
Because Marab is number one contender, even though I'm not sure if O'Malley's promised the next title shot or not. Um, we'll see how the bantamweight politics play out in the future. It's a great main event, and we also have a brilliant co-main event after Dariush versus Oliveira fell out. Bilal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns was booked over 5 rounds, I believe, right?
Yeah. I was just gonna double check that myself, but I think so.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Tapology 5 rounds. Burns recently overcame Masvidal like 3 weeks ago. Um, Muhammad obviously going through Ramadan. So he's been out for a little bit, but obviously the last win was over Sean Brady, where he knocked him out. Everyone's saying how Muhammad is a boring fighter who never gets finishes. Well, he knocked out an undefeated rising prospect in Brady. It's also essentially a guaranteed number one contender fight. Covington will fight Edwards next. I think that's kind of a given, considering what Dana's been saying. But after that, I think the winner of this fight will fight for a title. Brilliant fight. What's the read? What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I totally agree that this has to be the next. I mean, this isn't the conversation we need to have, but the person who wins this fight should be fighting Leon, if we're being honest. But I think that this is I know that it was like a super late notice fight to put together, but I think this is great. I know that Bilal has had a really long win streak, and there are some good names in there, but he's probably lacking that one name where, regardless of how good the performance is, you get the shot after that. And Gilbert is that name. And I think for Gilbert, if he's gonna get himself another title shot, then he needs to beat someone like Masvidal is a good win that gets a lot of attention, but you need someone who's been putting together wins if you're really gonna
It was ranked
get
11.
that shot. Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's great for both guys. I think that we know where Gilbert is in the division. I think the bigger questions are with Bilal because, as like I said, I know that he's beaten Damian Maia and Wonderboy and Luque, but Gilbert Burns to me is part of that upper tier of welterweights. He's kind of like, if you have, I would rank Leon, Usman, and Colby as kind of in their own little category almost, and then I would have Burns as the best of the rest, maybe Hamzat in there, depending on. I don't even think he's a welterweight anymore, but
Shavkat,
whatever. Shavkat, maybe one more win.
Yeah.
I would say technically he's there, but we just haven't seen him do it. Yeah. So Gilbert is the perfect opponent for Bilal. I think regardless, even if this is not an entertaining fight and Bilal just controls him for the majority of the fight, I think you have to give him a shot after he's beaten Gilbert, which is exactly what he needs. I don't get me wrong. I'm kind of hoping that the Brady fight is like a new version of Bilal, but because he looked so confident in that fight, which I was obviously nobody saw coming. So I'm hoping that we get more of that Bilal, but I don't know if we will.
Yeah, I don't think Burns will let him have that sort of fight. Even though Bilal got the finish in that fight and did look really good, the bigger takeaway I took from his fight with Brady was that Brady's not as good as I thought he was. He looked well off and not able to deal with that. I don't know, the pressure of Bilal, I suppose. Gilbert Burns will just meet him in the middle. He's a more powerful striker. He's a very competent wrestler, and we all know about the jiu-jitsu submission game that he has. I really love this fight. I know people hate on Bilal Muhammad, but he did not deserve to be matched up with Shavkat Rakhmonov after the win streak that he put together. This fight feels a lot more deserving. It feels right for both men. I agree with what you're saying about this being the right matchup to make. In terms of, stylistically, I think I favor Burns, at least early. The thing is, it's 5 rounds. I wonder how that is going to play into this fight, considering it is a short notice matchup. I know Bilal Muhammad essentially trains all year round, though he is coming off Ramadan, so maybe a little bit depleted after that. Possibly, it's hard to tell. I've spoken to a lot of fighters during and after Ramadan, and there's very different mindsets towards it because Lawson Cater for Octagon literally fought, I think, was it a week after or so? Whereas I spoke to Omram Chaban over at Cage Warriors, and he was like, I made sure I got a fight in before because there's no chance I'm fighting even within like a month of Ramadan finishing. So it's different perceptions. Bilal is a very good athlete. He's a consummate professional. So I don't doubt he'll be in decent shape at least. And so that kind of makes me wonder, considering Burns is coming off a fight, a fight camp, a 3 round fight with Masvidal. Will he still have it in the later rounds if he isn't able to get a finish? Bilal is relatively durable. I know who did he get finished by? Was it Jeff Neal a while back? Or Luke? I can't remember. But yeah,
Yeah, I think it was Luke, right? Because
yeah.
their recent fight was a rematch.
Yes, yeah. So I don't know. I feel like if Burns can't get it done, we might see Bilal start to take control as the latter rounds come around.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, what you just said, I think Bilal must have seen that as well because I'm sure I can't remember where I heard it. It might have been on MMA Hour. I
Mm,
think Bilal is the one that asked for this to be 5 rounds, which you would
okay.
maybe like is a little bit surprising, but clearly he thinks that he has the cardio advantage, and like you said, later rounds could prove to be huge for him. But I think Gilbert Burns is a really difficult matchup for
Yeah.
Bilal. Like really difficult. I mean, you look at the most recent wins that Bilal's had, Wonder Boy, Luke, and Sean Brady. The Sean Brady one, it wasn't really what we're used to seeing from Bilal, so you can't. That's difficult to compare. But he tends to take down
Mm.
strikers, and that's where he's had his advantage. But I always think of with Gilbert, I know that he didn't have to defend a ton of takedowns against Hamzat, but he did it well when he needed to. And
Yeah.
I remember the pace that he put on Woodley. Admittedly, Woodley was not really throwing anything back at him and making him work, but I remember the pace being a huge factor in that fight, that he was relentless for all 5 rounds. So I think Gilbert Burns is like a strange fighter where everyone rates him, and yet I still think he's quite underrated.
Mm.
So I think that Gilbert Burns is going to be a really tough fight for Bilal. I'm leaning towards Gilbert just because I don't see Bilal being able to implement that 5 round pressure that he's been
Mm.
able to do all 3 rounds. I don't think he's going to be able to do that for the whole fight against Gilbert. And I just think Gilbert is so much more dangerous with his submissions and with his knockout power that if Bilal can't do that and he can't keep it consistent, which I just think Gilbert is too technical for him to be able to let that happen, then I think it could get scary for Bilal, even in the later rounds, because
Mm.
Gilbert's submission skills, I know that we never see them up at welterweight,
Yeah.
but they are
They
so
are
good.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, they are still there, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think I lean towards the same sort of way as you. Just it just feels like Gilbert just has more going for him in this matchup. Um, but I don't know. Honestly, I've picked against Bilal so many times, and I
Yeah, me
feel
too.
awful for it. And every time I'm like, well, I should have seen that. Obviously, he's gonna just take down Thompson. Obviously, Luque's, no longer at his peak anymore. Uh, obviously, Brady's not as good as we all thought he was every single time. But once again, yeah, I'm on the side of Gilbert Burns against Bilal Muhammad just because, yeah, for all the reasons you say, he's got more ways to win this fight. It feels like the only thing that gives me pause is like I said before, how will Burns fare over the distance, considering he's only 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks off a 3 round fight with Masvidal. Um, yeah, there's some interesting caveats to it, but I'm definitely favoring Gilbert Burns. Moving on down this card, we have Jessica Andrade versus Yan Xiaonan. Really fun strawweight fight. I'm just such a big fan of Jessica Andrade. She's so much fun. Obviously she took the short notice fight with Erin Blanchfield up at flyweight and got submitted. Prior to that, though, she knocked Lauren Murphy around the cage in Brazil in a fight that really should have been finished. Yan Xiaonan looked like she was going to be the next sort of, the Chinese prospect that they were going to put against Weili Zhang in a big China card, but obviously fell off against Cara Esparza, who really did a number on her with that crucifix ground and pound. Then split decision win over Marina Rodriguez and a majority decision win over Mackenzie Dern. I feel like, yeah, she's looked a little less impressive as of late. And in this one, for me, it's just the power differential is going to be huge, in my opinion. Yan really has never been much of a finisher. She's technically good and has nice striking, but Jessica Andrade, especially down at this weight class, is just going to be a monster in there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that if this fight had maybe happened before the Carla Esparza loss, I could have made an argument for Yan Xiaonan being
Yeah,
able to pick her off at range and kind of go in there with the same game plan that Joanna had and just run rings around her for 15 minutes. But after the losses that she's had and that majority win over Mackenzie Dern, I'm just like, I don't think she can stay away from Jessica Andrade for long enough to where she's not going to get caught by something big, and then the pressure is just going to be too much. Like
mm,
I'm not saying that she's going to get finished, but I just can't see her being able to land too much effectively whilst being on the
yeah.
back foot so much, because you know what Jessica Andrade is going to do, and I just don't think she's at that level where she can stay out the way of that for 15 minutes while still winning the fight.
Yeah, and even if Yan starts out striking Andrade, I just imagine Andrade is going to have the round winning moments as well. She has that round changing power, and she might not finish the fight, but yeah, I think this is Andrade's fight to win, unless she goes really gun shy or maybe struggles with the range of Yan, which is not something I'm envisioning happening. I'm definitely on the side of Jessica Andrade. So let's move on to the opening fight of the main card. Kron Gracie is back. Who saw that coming? And he's taking on Charles Jourdain. Sort of probably not ever going to win a title, but he is a guaranteed action fighter who always brings it, puts on great performances, has a brilliant personality. Obviously, Kron has been out for 3 years and 6 months. The last fight was the first loss of his pro career to Cub Swanson. He lost via unanimous decision. Prior to that, he was on a 6-fight winning streak, which included a win over Bruce Leroy, Alex Caceres. Very impressive. I think you probably have to favor Charles Jourdain, considering he's actually been fighting. I mean, this goes in complete like juxtaposition to my pick for the main event, where I'm back in Cejudo, who's been out for however long. But I mean, Ron Gracie was always a slightly one-dimensional. Well, slightly. He was a one-dimensional fighter. There's no two ways about that. But and maybe when he was competing regularly, he was starting to evolve that game a bit. But now that he's been out for so long, we don't really have any evidence to indicate that he's any better than the person that lost to Swanson. Jourdain's been in there regularly. He fights often. He's active. He's a dynamic striker with some cool submissions in his game as well. I find myself favoring Jourdain. I don't know. Am I wrong in doing so? What was the read?
No, I don't think so. I think like when this matchup got announced, I was like, Kron Gracie's been gone for ages, and he's coming off of a loss as well. Why have they given him Charles Jourdain? And then I looked at it and I was like, okay, I know that Charles Jourdain has got back-to-back losses, but
Yeah.
first of all, Nathaniel Wood in that fight looked incredible.
Oh, so
And
good.
the fight with Shane Burgos was really close.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, if you look at it just on paper, he's got back-to-back losses. Maybe you can argue that the Gracie matchup makes sense, but I'm like, man, I don't think people realize how good Charles Jourdain is, because
Mm.
this seems crazy to me. He lost to Cub Swanson like you said, like 3.5 years ago, and then you put him in with Charles Jourdain, who, in my opinion, isn't that far away from the top 15. Like he's on that, like you said, probably never going to be a world champion in the UFC, but like he's going to have some really fun fights whilst he's there,
Hmm.
and definitely take some bonuses with him. Like I think Charles Jourdain is a really good fighter, and I love watching Kron Gracie, or I did when he used to fight 3 years ago,
Yeah.
because you're like, I don't know how this is going to happen, but who knows? And I'm like, I know he's been gone for a long time. Maybe he's been spending all of that time working on his striking. But as a Gracie, I can't imagine that he has. I'm going to
Mm.
guess he's been spending 3 years rolling.
Yeah.
So I just don't know this matchup is very strange. And yeah, I would have Charles Jourdain as a big favorite.
He's less of a favorite than Movsar Evloev is. So,
Oh wow, that is
yeah,
surprising.
at least via topology, their odds are sometimes a bit strange. But yeah, but I like it as like a main card opener fight because you are intrigued. Like,
Yeah.
what are we going to see in there? Um, and it kind of sets up the main event quite nicely as well because what can the guy do when he's been out for three plus years? Um, yeah, it is weird, but it's fun. It's fun. I like it. Um, I think we've sort of ran out of time now. I've been speaking about this for quite a while. Like you said before, though, Drew Dober versus Matt Pravola is a brilliant featured prelim. And yes, the other one is Marina Rodriguez versus Verna Jandiroba, which is another fun fight between two top 15 ranked fighters, I believe. Or at least Rodriguez definitely is. Just looking for the rest of the card. Is there any other matchups on there? Phil Horse is fighting. Oh, Daniel Wildcat Santos is fun as well. But
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this one is probably the weakest pay-per-view card that we've had this year. I would have to go back and look, but
the
the
Australia
prelims.
one was a bit dodgy.
Yeah, I guess so.
But
Yeah.
that had a super fight on top of it, so
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I feel like those are the ones that I'm gonna be, you know, tuning in for, and then everything else that I catch is a bonus. But I think that they have placed the fights really well.
that's true.
Like Marina and Werner at the moment, at least I've got it on Wikipedia. I don't know if it's the same for Tapology, but that's supposed to be opening the prelims. And then obviously Dober and Fravola as the final prelim. It's great, and then like you said, I have like a weird interest in seeing this main card opener with Kron Gracie. So like I'm really like my interest is like well staggered throughout this card, if that makes sense. Like I want to know if Kron Gracie comes back looking like when Khalil Roundtree went to Thailand.
Oh, that was incredible.
I can't wait.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, well, I think that wraps things up. Thank you for coming on, Kyle. Always appreciate it. Do you want to plug your social media and let people know where they can find your work?
Yeah, go to Violent Money TV. It's really difficult to not say VMTV, but we have changed the name now, which is still confusing me. But yeah, most of my stuff on there. And we should have some staff picks and stuff like that coming out for this card, so plenty of stuff going up on there.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks for coming on once again. And I'm sure we'll be back at some point in the future. Peace.